They thought humans were just another primitive species from a backwater planet, soft, unrefined, emotional. The Galactic Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds with ease. Why would Earth be any different? But there was one voice that tried to stop them. An old alien war veteran, scarred from a forgotten battle, stood before the Empire's High Council and uttered a chilling warning. Do not engage Earth's soldiers. You do not understand what they are. He was ignored. Laughed. Out of the chambers. Weeks later, the Empire's elite forces arrived in Earth's orbit, confident and heavily armed. What they found wasn't resistance. It was calculated silence. And when the Terran response came, it wasn't through diplomats or surrender. It came through forests soaked in fire, skies darkened by stealth bombers, and soldiers who moved. Like ghosts, Earth didn't send politicians. Earth sent its warriors. And the galaxy would never be the same again. A veteran's warning general, Kothver of the Droxan Vanguard, was not known for fear. His name alone was enough to silence a room. He had fought in 17 interstellar wars, stared down the Korgax hive, and watched entire systems burn. But there was one memory that haunted him more than any other: Earth. 20 years earlier, during a routine skirmish near the outer Terran colonies, Kothver's battle group had been deployed to assess and control a small human outpost on a moon orbiting Gliese 581 grams. The assignment was considered simple. The humans were newcomers to the galactic scene, barely a century into faster-than-light travel. Intelligence labeled them emotional, chaotic, primitive. The Droxan fleet expected an easy occupation. Instead, they encountered resistance so ferocious, so unpredictable, that it rewrote everything Kothver thought he knew about warfare. His battle group of 14,000 was reduced to just 312 survivors. No official record of that loss was ever released by the Empire, only whispers. Kothver returned to the Empire scarred, mentally and physically. He testified before the Galactic Senate, detailing what he had seen, descriptions of human tactics that defied logic, stories of soldiers who continued to fight after losing limbs, who weaponized their own emotions, who refused to retreat even when outnumbered. His words were received with polite nods and veiled skepticism. No one wanted to believe that such a young species could pose any real threat. The Empire moves 2 decades passed, and the Empire continued to expand. Earth's territory grew as well, mostly peacefully, but with a firm stance of self-defense. Humanity had kept to itself, but when the Empire introduced a new tax on outer systems, including a small Terran colony in the Keltaran sector, Earth refused. Diplomats were sent. Messages were exchanged. Then, without warning, a Terran diplomatic ship was destroyed in what the Empire called an unfortunate targeting malfunction. The Terran response was silence. No threats, no demands. Just complete radio silence. Seeing this as an opportunity to demonstrate power, the Empire mobilized the 9th Imperial Legion, an elite force of over 100,000 soldiers, supported by 12 dreadnoughts and nearly 200 auxiliary ships. Their mission was simple: pacify the Terran colony and send a message. Kothver, now retired and stationed at a quiet diplomatic post, watched the broadcasts in silence. He knew what was coming. Contact the fleet arrived in orbit over New Carthage, a mid-sized human colony on the outer rim. Planetary scans showed minimal defenses. No orbital platforms, no large-scale weaponry, no warships in sight. The commanding admiral, Threxer Balvin, ordered the first wave of ground troops to land. The operation was expected to last no more than 2 days, but as the dropships entered the atmosphere, they encountered unexpected interference, jamming signals, weather manipulation. Then the first ship was hit not by surface-to-air missiles, but by what appeared to be kinetic rail projectiles fired from the ground. By the time the first wave landed, communications were fractured. The troops found themselves in dense forests, urban ruins, and environments perfectly suited for ambushes. And that's exactly what happened. Humans didn't wait for the fight. They initiated it. Earth's soldiers, the Terran Defense Corps, was not what the Empire expected. These weren't mindless conscripts or cowardly colonists. These were trained, hardened, elite units that had spent their lives preparing for a war the rest of the galaxy thought impossible. Terran doctrine wasn't based on numbers or superior technology. It was based on adaptability, resourcefulness, and an almost unsettling level of emotional focus. They used guerrilla tactics. They fought dirty. They planted empty mines disguised as vegetation, weaponized the terrain, and turned weather conditions into strategic tools. Thermal cloaking, cyber disruption, biochemical fogs, tools the Empire had seen before, but never used with such precision. Worse still, they didn't just resist, they counterattacked. Entire platoons vanished overnight. Dreadnoughts were crippled by sabotage teams that somehow got on board. And when the Empire tried to retaliate, they found themselves fighting phantoms. Kothver returns. Within 3 weeks, the Ninth Legion had lost nearly 60% of its forces. Dreadnoughts began retreating to higher orbit. Panic spread through the command structure. In desperation, the Senate summoned Kothvar. He was reinstated with emergency authority and given control over what remained of the operation. Kothvar did not celebrate. When he landed on New Carthage, he didn't bring reinforcements. He brought evacuation plans. He met with the remnants of the Legion and gave a single order: we will not win this. We must survive it. The turning point, using what he remembered from his first encounter, Kothvar attempted to communicate with the human commanders. He sent encrypted messages offering truce, retreat, anything. What he received was a single reply, a transmission from Commander Lyra Mason of the Terran Defense Corps. This is not a negotiation. You invaded, you kill, we bury. And we don't lose twice. Kothvar understood the meaning. This was not just war. It was a statement. Humanity would not be bullied. They had learned from history, their own and others. And now they had the power to enforce it. He implemented a slow, calculated withdrawal, covering what remained of the Empire's forces as best he could. Over 400 ships were lost during the retreat, but thanks to his leadership, a few thousand soldiers made it out. The aftermath. The Galactic Empire did not speak of New Carthage. Officially, it was labeled a temporary strategic loss. But internally, fear began to spread. For the first time in centuries, a single colony had turned away the might of the Empire. Humanity made no demands. They didn't retaliate. They didn't broadcast threats. They just watched. And that silence unnerved the galaxy more than any declaration of war ever could. Kothvar returned to his diplomatic station and refused any further promotions. He published a single report for classified military archives titled "The Iron Will of Terra, a Strategic Miscalculation." The final line of the document read, "You do not engage Earth's soldiers unless you are ready to rewrite your understanding of war." Legacy years passed. The Empire turned its eyes elsewhere, now hesitant to expand near Terran space. Other species took note. The humans were no longer seen as young or primitive. They were seen as dangerous, not because they were aggressive, but because they could be relentless. Kothvar lived long enough to see human officers commanding peacekeeping missions. He saw Terran advisors training alien defense forces. He even met Commander Mason in person. During a diplomatic summit on Zenther Prime, she shook his hand and said, "Next time, send diplomats first." He smiled. For the first time in decades, and somewhere in the Empire's high command, deep in the vaults where only a few dared to look, a file remained sealed under highest security clearance. Title: Terran Combat Doctrine, Unrestricted Human Warfare. Inside were reports, footage, and a singular quote etched in red: "The quiet reverberation. Even in peace, the shadow of New Carthage lingered." The battle had ended, but its echoes reshaped how the galaxy viewed conflict. In military academies across the stars, simulations now included Terran war scenarios. Species that once dismissed humans as impulsive began inviting Terran strategists to lectures, desperate to understand the mind behind the madness. On minor worlds, children grew up playing war games where the Terran side was always the most feared faction. Human stories, once curiosities, were now translated into dozens of languages. The legends of their resistance became case studies. But behind all the admiration was something more primal. Caution. The Senate's closed doors, behind the grand marble doors of the Galactic Senate, debate grew heated. A faction had arisen that wanted to form an alliance with Earth, not out of camaraderie, but survival. Another insisted humanity remain isolated and monitored. But a third voice, one older and quieter, proposed a bold idea: learn from them. Kothvar sat in on these meetings as an advisor now. When asked his opinion, he said only this: you can't outmuscle them. You have to understand why they fight. Then, and only then, will you understand how they win. A whispered legacy commander, Lyra Mason, eventually retired. She refused every medal, declined every interview. Her last act was a classified debrief sent to only one recipient, Kothvar. In it, she wrote, "You tried to warn them. That matters. We don't forget that." He kept that message in his personal archives, stored beside the only two things he ever carried from battlefield to battlefield: a scorched tea.